Welcome back to Ivy Unleashed. Today's guest, she's a functional medicine doc, mold and environmental toxicity expert, podcast host, author. She's been featured in Forbes, People, NBC News, The Huffington Post, and now Ivy Unleashed. We are so honored to have you here today. Dr. Jill, welcome to Ivy Unleashed.
Thank you, Brooke. I am super excited to be here with both of you today.
You forgot to mention a movie also. We got to talk about this movie. There's a lot to cover today. So many questions for you and just such a big life you're living where you're changing people's lives. You've been through so much. And so we're really excited to hear. Oh my gosh, we have questions that are about you, the people that you've helped, some of the opinions you have. I'm really excited and honored that you're here today. So thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
It's amazing. On top of all of those things you do, you're also taking care of your health. Offline, you were just saying you had to get infusions, and you wrote this incredible book that highlights your story so beautifully, Unexpected, finding resilience through functional medicine, science, and faith. And it's really a roadmap for navigating chronic illness, unlike anything I've ever read, taking into account faith and hope and also science. The amount of value and information in this book. First of all, thank you for writing this book.
Oh, thank you for seeing me through it. That means the world.
Yeah. So for our listeners who are unfamiliar with you, will you just quick share all of the things that you've healed from and what inspired you?
Quick.
Yes, and this is the funny thing, I was told by so many publishers you can't write a memoir, which is kind of a story of yourself and what's going on, right? Unless you're famous. And I kept feeling in my intuitive self, which is one of the lessons of the book, to trust your intuition, that the story is our connective tissue. And the truth is, the story is my story, but it's not really about me. It's about the reader seeing reflections of their own journey and hopefully being encouraged that they can too. I'm no different than the every woman, and that they also can overcome illness. So 25 years old, I had breast cancer, aggressive breast cancer. I was the youngest diagnosed in my medical school where I was studying medicine in my third year. And then about 6 months after I finished all the aggressive chemotherapy, radiation, and treatment, I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Now, fortunately, about 20 years later, I'm completely free of both diseases through my own practice of functional medicine, applying that. And then I went on to, I had residual immune. We were just talking about that. I still get immune infusions because my immune system has never been the same since the chemo. But I'm thriving. It's just one of those things that you need to take care of yourself and all of that. But I had also mold related illness in an office in Boulder, Colorado, where I practice medicine. After the floods got really moldy, and I had to do a crash course in environmental toxicity and mold related illness. And that's a lot of what I've been doing in the last decade, is helping patients heal from environmental toxicity and mold. Along the way of some autoimmunity and other things there, but overall, I'm thriving, and I love to use those lessons because I realize that when we view suffering and illness and difficulties as teachers, all of a sudden it transforms not only our ability to heal ourselves, but our ability to take those lessons and share them with friends and family and clients and patients, and really inspire and help other people to heal as well.
Wow. Wow. I just keep thinking about the amount of knowledge that is in your brain. And not that, just I think being a physician and helping people and then coming up with answers. Like Brooke and I were in a functional doctor's office today, and the amount of knowledge in her brain, and it's like piecing this puzzle together, and the fact that you're doing it for yourself in all of these ways is just, to me, it's so hopeful. The message I keep getting from your book and from following you and hearing you is just this constant message of hope. And that's what, especially people that are trying to heal from something, need. It can be so exhausting. And, I don't know how much of Brooke's story but to have the hope along with the frustration, along with not feeling well, it's challenging. So how's that been throughout your life? And I'm sure there's lots of different ways that you can navigate this, but within that of having the hope while trying to learn the information, while trying to apply it to your life while not feeling well.
Yes, yes, and amen, Brooke. I get you. I totally understand. And those of you listening out there that are suffering, I think one of the most important things is how our identity is formed, like who we are, what we believe we are, what we believe we're capable of. And the faith part for me is I definitely have a strong faith background, but whatever religion, belief, non-belief, whatever place you come from, the importance there is really believing that something else is possible and believing that we're not limited by our current circumstances, that there is something else. Um, when I was in the midst of breast cancer, of course, 25, it was a shocking diagnosis. And I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but I was the youngest person ever diagnosed in that medical school. And so it really was this kind of unusual, aggressive thing that no one ever even, knew what to do with at that age. So even for me, trying to decide through treatments and that was very difficult and overwhelming. And I have such compassion for those facing, and I had a medical degree that I was working on. So anyone facing complex chronic illness, it is overwhelming and it is confusing. And it is, you hear one person say this and the other doctor say this. And to try to navigate that, I have deepest compassion because it's so difficult. But some of the things that are important there are really trusting your intuitive sense about what's right and making sure you have an advocate in your physician, your coach, your healthcare team, because you have to really, we're no longer in a paternalistic where the physician has all the answers. It's a partnership. So making sure that you have that kind of a team that really partners with you and checks in with you, because there's no one size fits all. And every drug or situation or treatment has side effects. So you really have to think through those things. But one thing to your question is that I think is so critical is that very often after my breast cancer and Crohn's, I would teach to physicians and I would stand on the podium and be like, oh, I overcame breast cancer and I overcame Crohn's and here's the story. And I would tie it up in a neat, tidy bow saying, I've overcome this and now I'm healed. And it's true to an extent, but what I learned was far, far more powerful and more authentically true is each and every day, I still have an immune deficiency. I still have days I'm fatigued. I'm still in the journey, just like you, if you're listening out there, just like maybe you, Brooke, or as we go and telling that story more truthfully in the sense that I am here with you in the trenches. And granted, I have some wonderful days of feeling amazing and I'm so grateful for life. But when I started changing the story and talking about in the trenches, this is what we do, all of a sudden I'm one of you. I am no different. I'm no better. I'm no more smart or any of those things. I'm just here with you learning and we're holding hands side by side and helping each other on the journey. And that is a more authentic story than the influencer out there that looks like they have it all together because none of us do, right?
Yeah. And I always say too to people, like, I will never be healed. There is no end. And once I learned that and accepted that and started living from that place, it was freeing. I'll always be learning more. I'll always have things thrown at me. And I think that releases some of the pressure to have it all figured out. So I love that you said that. Thank you. And what I'm hearing you say is a lot of self-compassion. And that's something you speak so deeply about in the book. So will you share a little bit about how you feel being more self-compassionate really was the key to quote unquote healing?
Yeah, so I love functional medicine. I love the supplements, the diet, the lifestyle, the nutrition. And I often say it starts with clean air, clean water, clean food. So all those principles apply. However, what you just said, Brooke, is so crucial. And this is, how do we feel in our bodies? How do we trust ourselves? I lived in my analytical mind from the neck up until about 40 years old when I went through a difficult divorce that really transformed me. And even though it was one of the most painful circumstances of my life, it completely shattered who I thought I was, what I thought I knew to be true. And in that shattering, I recreated a version of myself that is so much healthier. Part of that new version was someone who actually loves all parts of herself, even the parts that we used to deem unworthy or the kinds of things of whether it's a physical attribute or a mental attribute or a personality trait that we didn't really like, or a way we dealt with a situation. So often we have these parts that we relegate to the background because they're not acceptable. For me, I was, taught to be a good girl and to be quiet and to be helpful and to be service oriented. All those things are wonderful. But what happened is a lot of that was at the expense of my own needs. I didn't think that I had needs. I didn't think that I could express them. And I certainly had some self-loathing parts. And those parts, again, can lead to autoimmunity because autoimmune disease metaphorically is attack of ourselves. So I believe that some of the most profound healing I did was doing this work of who are we? What's our identity? What do we really believe? And do we show the unconditional love that we want to show to others to ourselves first? Because unless we start there and really, really practice loving all parts of ourselves and accepting all of those pieces, we can't really heal our bodies. Our cells know the difference.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm curious what that looks like when you think about going through that divorce time and, the pain of it and the uncovering and the learning about yourself and then learning to love yourself. What are you doing to get there? What does that look like? I'm thinking in my mind, journaling, therapy, crying, releasing these emotions, but like, is that what it was for you? Or what were you doing to kind of get to that place where you knew who you were and you knew that you could shed some of these things that weren't?
So good, because the practical is really where it's at. So first thing is I found that you can't really love and accept yourself unless you trust yourself. And this is back to if you're a patient sitting in a doctor's office and they tell you, oh, well, this is all in your head, or oh, the labs look normal. Your symptoms must be, maybe you need an antidepressant. And we've all heard those stories or been there ourselves, and that's medical gaslighting. And when we take that authority and believe that that's true, then we discount our own intuition that says something's not right. I need help. And so if you're, hopefully you aren't in an office like that, but if you are, find a new physician because you need someone who will advocate for yourself. But you also need to start by trusting something's not right. I know this and I need to do something differently. Had I listened, I was in this hardworking farm family environment. So I pushed myself. I worked so hard. I denied that I really had needs. And I went into a medical system that was very paternalistic, very masculine, energy driven. And I took all that on because it fit that norm of being a hard worker, don't complain, buck up, don't all that. Had I listened to my intuition, I would have realized that those 36-hour shifts and the absolute, it was blatant disregard for humanity. Don't eat, don't sleep, all those kinds of things for our cells that would have been healthy. I would have listened and said, you know what? I need to take a break, or I need to make sure that I get rest, or I maybe need to do things differently. But instead, I bought that hook, line, and sinker as far as the paradigm of medicine, and I pushed aside my own needs. I pushed aside my own intuition that it was too much, and I developed cancer as a result, as a part of the result. So, practical speaking, what do we do? First thing we do is we are kind to ourselves, and we look back at that younger self and say, sweetheart, you are beautiful. You did such a good job. You're so strong. All the things that we think maybe we aren't. And we go back to those parts of ourselves that believed we weren't worthy, we weren't enough, and we had to prove something to somebody. And we talk to them. Literally, you can put a picture on your phone and do it in real time. And you reparent and you relove those younger little girl parts of yourselves that were afraid or were not enough or thought they were too much or thought that their needs didn't matter. And you start to literally talk. I remember sitting in the bathtub over and over again as I was healing and talking to myself, like in real time, sweetheart, you're strong and you're brave and you did such a good job and you were scared, but it's okay. And you can, as your older self, tell your younger self, I'm here for you now. There's nothing you have to be afraid of. And those things actually transform our cells. That's number one. The second thing is self-compassion and kindness. And I practice this in so many ways, but one really simple way is in my medicine cabinet. I open it up. There's an old sticky note. It's nothing fancy. And it says, what does she need from me today? And every morning it's my reminder, I might have a full packed schedule of interviews and I might be exhausted or, and I might need to cancel. And instead of being like, oh my gosh, I can't let people down, which was my old self, I might say, you know what? I have to take care of myself today. I'm going to disappoint someone. And I hate that. But I can't do what I have scheduled today. Or something along those lines. Or you might be like, I'm really, really, really tired and I need to go take dinner to a friend. You might say, well, I'm going to take a nap first and then do that. You might put yourself first, which again is really hard for us women who've been servant oriented, service oriented, kind of taking care of others' needs. So those are some of the small and big ways that we can start to reparent and have compassion. So trust your intuition and practice that so that you don't get gaslight by people telling you you don't, you shouldn't think that way, or you're, not really, nothing's wrong with your physical health. And then second, being very kind and compassionate, even having that self-talk. Like sometimes I'll bump into the wall and say, oh, sweetheart, like you would literally can give yourself that compassion like your mother would or your father would. And I had wonderful parents. So I always like to say that because it's not like I had a horrible big T trauma childhood. I had an incredible family, but all of us have wounds that need healing. And we can start, instead of relying on someone else to heal those wounds, we can start to do it for ourselves.
I love that. It's just practice. And the more we do it, the more it becomes normal and it becomes a habit, and neuroplasticity, which you talk about in the book, among all other things too. Something I have found is the more I quiet the external noise, the more I put away social media. Andrew and I were just talking about this today, not listening to as many other podcasts, because although podcasts really help me heal and learn about functional medicine, I can get so obsessed with the diet and the supplements, and I got to change this and I got to shift that. And that stress does not help. And that almost overpowers my intuition. It's kind of a dance, is what I found. So I'm curious how you maybe still today or in the past navigated that of listening to the experts, doing what they say, but keeping that intuition strong.
Brooke, that is a great question because it goes to the heart. Because even as a physician, I might give them a list of supplements and a list of to-dos or whatever. But one thing I love to check in on with my patients and also with myself is I remember the days, especially like right after the divorce, I was going to somatic therapist and doing EMDR and doing neurofeedback and doing neurolinguistic programming. And I love learning. So I was reading books and all this stuff, right? But there was a point a few years after the divorce where I had so many appointments, and it might have been good things like massage or craniosacral therapy, but my schedule was jam-packed with appointments to help my health. And it was so stressful for me because all of a sudden I'm like, I should be. And you always know when there's the should and the must, those are part of those words that, oh, I'm under pressure here. This is not helpful. And there was a period of time where I canceled everything. And I just had to really, really make sure that I wasn't in this identity of a sick person seeking help and reinforcing that sick person behavior by the need of all these specialists and people to help me. And now I still, when there's time, I will do those kinds of therapies, but they're my choice and they're not by obligation. And I think that's so crucial. And then supplements and diet and those kinds of things, same way. I happen to believe that we're usually either black and white, like a all or nothing, or they call it the moderator and the abstainer. And this mentality can help you decide how you live your life and do your things. Moderators need some wiggle room. So for example, if I told them you need to be completely 100% off gluten, dairy, soy, corn, you name it, all these foods, they would literally be like, deer in the headlight. I can't do that.
That's
doctor,
me.
Right?
That's me. I'm a moderator.
So moderators need that wiggle room. And so then I might say, well, 90% of the time I want you to do this. And maybe on just gluten, I don't want you to cheat, but on all these other things, or maybe it's like a 80-20 rule and we negotiate that. Now, on the other side of someone like me, I'm an abstainer. Abstainers just find it easier to have a rule because if they have a rule, then they go to the restaurant and someone says, would you like bread? I just know I don't eat gluten, so I don't have to make a decision. I don't have to use that energy to make a decision. But that's not everybody. And I love to find out my patients, are you a moderator or an abstainer? Because for me, the rule of just I never eat gluten, I never eat dairy, whatever the XYZ is, those rules help me because I never have to waste energy on making decisions. But if you're a moderator, that feels so restrictive that you go off the deep end because you can't stay in that lane. So it's real important to find out who you are and then use that to your advantage so it doesn't feel oppressive.
You're an abstainer, aren't you?
Oh, for sure. I'm like no alcohol. I'm like doing 75 hard just so that I don't have to think. And the decision making is just taken out of, nope, I just don't do this. Same
and I don't gluten. Like anybody telling me what to do. So I'm like,
I don't either. But if it's me telling me what to do, it's kind of, it's different. That makes me think today when we were in this appointment, we're talking about just, it is hard to be healthy in society today. And there's new information coming out and reading your book, Dr. Jill, your childhood, you're on the farm and there's pesticides and there's chemicals and you have so many awesome recommendations in your book for traveling. It is overwhelming. How do you navigate that? Giving your patients recommendations when they could be doing a million different things. They could be changing their complete lifestyle, or maybe it is a little too stressful for them to change everything at once. So what are kind of like the big, do these things and your body is in, like the basics, maybe let's say.
You got it. And I love that because that really is the case. And even if it's financial, if all these therapies or appointments or PMF mats and supplements, it can be thousands of dollars and not everybody can afford that, but it doesn't mean you can't get well. So the first thing is that I like to say something very simple, and I think it's doable for almost everyone. And that's clean air, clean water, clean food, and then maybe clean mind, but that basics, it doesn't have to be a lot of expensive supplements because half of the battle is the inputs every day. As you mentioned, the environmental toxic load. I remember when I first got breast cancer and then realized some of the chemicals, whether it was makeup or hair products or cleaning products, were affecting my predisposition towards cancer. And it was literally so overwhelming to try to change that all out and so expensive. And I bet it took me 2 years to really go through makeup, bath and body products. Now it's easier after all these years. But having said that, so clean air that we breathe, 80% of our environmental toxic load is in the air that we breathe. So if you just get an air filter, if you just open your windows frequently, get some airflow in your home, those are pretty simple ways to start with clean air. And air that we breathe is probably the most important thing we could do as far as environmental toxic load. Clean water. So drinking clean water, trying to avoid plastic water bottles, getting a filter if you can. And this doesn't have to be expensive. I have a fridge filter. I don't even have a whole house filter because I live in a condo. It's harder to install. The fridge filter, I think, is $30. And then I replace a filter every 6 months. So it's not that expensive. And I have really, really clean water to drink. On my shower, I have a filter as well. So those two things may be 50, $70, and you have clean water. Now, whole house filter is even better, but you don't have to have that to make it successful. And then clean food. And this is crucial as far as the 80-20 rule. You want to really make sure you're eating clean. But what happens is people think that they have to buy all organic, or it's the processing that costs a lot. So if you buy packaged pre-cut organic broccoli, it costs 10 times as much as a head of broccoli, or the local farmer's market who's just grown the fresh fruits and vegetables. So you can eat organic and eat very clean, but you may have to do a little more work of cutting up the vegetables or cleaning the bag of rice and then making it. And if you're willing to do that, you can save. I think they did a study that actually showed an organic diet when you buy in bulk is actually cheaper than a conventional processed or prepared diet.
Ooh,
Good to
interesting.
know.
I want to circle back to the clean mind though, because I do feel like in a lot of these stories and in hearing about Crohn's and the way that you talked yourself through, what you went through as a kid and then with your divorce, that a lot of this had to do with suppressed emotions. And I feel like I'm hearing about this a lot of like suppressing how you feel eventually becomes illness. And so how have you seen kind of that release or exploring this kind of change, whether it was an illness or just how you're feeling on a regular basis?
Oh, another great question, because this was where I remember right after the divorce, kind of realizing when I first started going to therapy, I talked to the therapist and I said, I don't have anger. Like, and I'm laughing now because who says they don't have anger? Like, how ridiculous. I really believed that. I was almost 40 and I really believed I think I said, I don't get angry. Like, that's ridiculous. It's not true. But I had so suppressed. I grew up in a culture where the women, were kind and gentle and helpful. And like I said, and there wasn't a real place for women to be angry. And certainly I didn't see that a lot in my family, which is nice. I mean, I had happy, wonderful relating parents, but I didn't see that modeled of how to have a healthy anger. And the truth is, it'll bubble out. It's almost like when you squeeze a balloon and pieces pop through your fingers, and you can see those it'll come out some way. And it usually is frustration, irritability, whatever. And you might not call it anger, but it's anger. So what happened is, as I started to do NLP and biofeedback and do the work and do the somatic work, I started to open up, and emotions that I had never allowed to really feel, the deep sadness of facing cancer in my 20s and the loss that entailed, the anger that I felt at my ex-husband for leaving. And some of these things started to bubble up. And when it first bubbled up, if you haven't been used to feeling emotions, it is like a tsunami. There's a reason we suppress it, because it's actually more comfortable than that first wave that comes over you and feels like you're going to drown. I'll never forget the first few times I felt sadness or anger. I've been a pretty optimistic, happy person my whole life. That first week, I was like, oh, this is what it must be like to be depressed. Like, it's so sad and so overwhelming. But what happens is, as you understand this too shall pass and you let those waves go over you, each wave that comes again is easier. And you're allowing, instead of like constricting, resisting against those emotions, which it takes so much energy, it takes so much cellular energy, and it causes illness. When you allow these feelings to emerge, they get easier and easier and easier. And all of a sudden you realize, no matter what emotion's going to come and it'll go, and I can handle this. And you start to become more confident in your ability to handle whatever life brings. That is resilience. And over my life, I continue to learn this. I'm in the process just like you, but so much of resilience is knowing now that anything that comes my way, it might be super painful and so sad and so devastating, but I believe with all my heart that anything that comes my way, I have the resources now to handle it. And when you go into life with that knowledge, there's nothing you can't overcome.
Reminds me of you in the book speaking of gratitude for the trauma and how that mindset shift, like a clean mind of not holding on to that, like understanding there's a time and a place to be angry, to be upset, but to not stay stuck in that. And I think gratitude practice is a beautiful way to kind of flip the script. So how have you seen gratitude specifically help with your resiliency?
Yeah, so when you take these things that we hate, financial loss, divorce, another breakup of a relationship, loss of someone we love, even loss of your pets. Like I lost two dogs in the last couple of years, and they were 17 years with me, and they were probably the closest thing that has ever been emotionally to me. It was really hard. But when we take those things and see them instead of as happening to us, but happening, and you've all heard this before, for us, and instead of asking why and saying, why did this happen to me? We can get stuck in that loop. We say, how? How can this benefit me? And we flip it because how we look for the perception of an incident is how we frame it and how it actually manifests in our life. So when we stop asking the question, why? And we stop resisting, all of a sudden we see, oh my goodness, in this really difficult circumstance, I became a stronger, better person. I learned something really valuable. And then we know that the next difficult circumstance, we may not want it. It may not be pleasant. We may hate every minute of it. But if we can start to embrace that instead of resist it, that's where the gratitude comes in because we can be thankful for those things that are difficult because it transforms us. And I always am afraid of when I say this, it sounds like Pollyanna, right? Like everything's great. And no, no, no. I understand there is real, real suffering. And when you lose someone you love, you have to grieve. There is no way around it. And you can't just be like, oh, I'm thankful my mother died. I mean, no, these are really serious things. However, in the midst of that, if you know you're going to be okay, and you can thank God for the ability to breathe another breath and the simple things that you have that you still have, that's where it transforms. And that's where you can, it's literally like putting on a rose-colored glasses, as they would say. You can shift and shape your environment by your view, and you can choose your view. Viktor Frankl, one of my favorite authors who's been through far more than I could ever imagine, a Holocaust survivor, often talks about how in the concentration camps, in the most depraved circumstances a human could be in, he had gratitude and he reframed because he knew that he could choose his mindset. No matter what the other people did to him, he could always choose his mindset.
I keep thinking about like that is such a full, beautiful, like full circle way of feeling all of the emotions, right? Because you're addressing the good ones and the bad ones. You're feeling it all. You're not afraid of it. You know that you can handle it. But I'm curious about you interacting with other people in your life that maybe distract themselves and numb themselves and just kind of live more surface level rather than fully feeling all the things. Like, how has that been with for you having relationships with people that are maybe at a different level of consciousness?
Oh, this is such a good question, right? Because we all have people we know in our lives that are very, and some of the people are more advanced where I look up, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're my mentor, right? So I want to
Yes.
say there's both ends. I'm right in the middle. But then there are those people who are incredibly pessimistic or negative. I have found I love a challenge and I love the pessimist or the, I call them grumpy monkeys because there's a little children, it's a children's book about grumpy monkey. And it's so funny because you're complaining and everything's bad and the sleepover is too long and you can't get a snack. And, but I kind of love it because how many people do we know are grumpy monkeys?
I was a grumpy monkey this morning. I was like, she needs to go back to bed.
So I love to ask questions because I don't want to be the one saying like, you should do, I don't want to be that person, right? That's not healthy at all. But I like to say, what was your favorite part of today? Because all of a sudden, just like the consciousness, the view of life, if you can get them thinking about some of the worst part of their day, I have a close friend that every day or every few days when we speak, I say, what was the favorite part of your day? And now there's gotten to be, and this is a pessimist. So this is someone who's classically pessimistic. And literally now he'll be like, oh, you got to ask me my favorite part of the day. Because he has something that he thought during the day, oh, Jill's going to ask me this. And I want to be ready for the answer. And I love it because it's literally shifted something inside as far as that. The second thing is energetically, I've learned I'm very porous. So I feel people deeply. And there is a place for restricting access in your life for people who are overly negative. And again, I'm not one to ever cut people off, or, I mean, granted, there's maybe certain abusive kind of situations, those would be appropriate. But for general friends and family and people in your life, I'm very open. But what I might do is I might limit the time I spend with them, limit the access, or make sure that I go to those places where I'm alone with music, with nature, or places that restore me. Because it's all like a battery, it's all like a bucket. And if you get with these people who are negative, 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 and you're an energetic being like me, it does affect us.
Yeah, well, and something I think about too is when we're talking of consciousness, right? Your consciousness is at a level where you believe the incurable can be cured. And you talk very openly about that. Of a lot of doctors don't agree. You say you've cured Crohn's. Will you speak on that, on why you believe that? And, you know, when everyone is telling you differently, like you have such a strong faith, how do you keep that alive?
Yes. So I love the analogy with the Crohn's, because that was one of those times where I was diagnosed about 6 months after I finished chemotherapy. I was so sick. I had no hair. I mean, I'd gone through 3 drug chemotherapy. And now in hindsight, it's no surprise from a functional perspective, because that chemotherapy, one of the mechanisms is to create a more permeable gut, because that dumping of the gut lining contents actually triggers the immune system to be overactive, which helps fight the cancer, does not help autoimmunity or any inflammatory process. So post chemo, I was very sick, had a terrible leaky gut, and had lots of toxic overload because of that. And so in hindsight, no surprise, I developed Crohn's. Crohn's is an autoimmune disease where your body attacks the lining of the gut, and it can be triggered by this dumping of bacterial contents from your gut lumen into your bloodstream. And it's usually someone like me that genetically is prone to have an abnormally aggressive response to that normal microbiome. That's how it started. So now in hindsight, of course that happened, right? But then I get this diagnosis. I go into the gastroenterologist and I'm talking to him. And he says, Jill, you're going to need lifelong immune modulating drugs. We can start with steroids and some of these heavier drugs you're probably going to need for life. You're probably going to have part of your colon removed over the time, and this is incurable. I mean, it was so hopeless. And I remember just getting ready to leave, and I thought, well, I want to do whatever I can. And I asked him just one question. I said, Doc, does diet have anything to do with this? And I was very sincere. I didn't know. I hadn't done a lot of nutrition. And he did not pause. He just looked at me and said, Jill, diet has nothing to do with this. Now, here's where the intuition comes in. And here's where I like to teach people. There was something deep inside of me that said that cannot be true. There's no way a gut disorder that is the lumen, our external environment interface with food, that food doesn't have anything to do with it. And yet I didn't have the scientific knowledge. I just had the intuition. And I went on a mission to prove him wrong. I went through the library, I found books, and I ended up finding some dietary changes. I started with specific carbohydrate diet, which is one of many. And literally within 2 weeks of changing my diet, getting rid of gluten, inflammatory foods, certain types of sugars, I had no fever, I had no pain, I had no bleeding. Now, I was not cured, but I knew in that moment that something had dramatically shifted. And the only thing, I didn't even take the steroid prescription. The only thing I had changed was diet. And this was 2 weeks. So I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that diet did have something to do with it. And so then I went on a mission to really figure this out. And in that, I ended up becoming a gut expert, and through several years of healing the gut microbiome, because with autoimmunity, there's a triad. So there's always a genetic component, which I had. I had both celiac genes and the gene for Crohn's disease. And then there's an environmental trigger. For me, it was probably the chemotherapy plus the dumping of the bacteria and the cancer and all of that. And then unbeknownst to me, I had celiac brewing and I was eating gluten. So all those things were environmental triggers that were continuing to create inflammation. And then the last thing is the gut immune interface. So this lining of the gut, that mine had been impaired by the damage that chemo did, and then dumping this and going back to all those 3 things. So the environmental triggers, genetics I couldn't change, and then the gut immune interface and healing those things, I literally became cured. I no longer have Crohn's disease. And as you guys alluded to, I mean, I'm a doctor, so I can say that. But even then, there are people who are like, that's crazy, or they deny the fact that I believe that I'm cured. The truth is I am cured. I have no evidence of Crohn's, and it's been over 20 years. But that doctor told me this was incurable. And now I see this in many, many other patients with other types of autoimmunity. They're told it's forever, it's incurable, it's lifelong. It's not true. I've seen it over and over and over again, where, as you mentioned, the irreversible becomes reversible. The incurable is curable.
It's listening to your intuition, that burning desire of there's got to be a different way. I am worth the effort to put into this. Like full circle at the beginning of this episode of hope. Like what you just said radiates hope. And I hope anyone listening who is struggling or know someone that's struggling can share this episode with them, because that's what you need to keep going, is that hope of it will get better. There is an answer. There is healing. There's so much you can do to feel better. And that's just one little piece of evidence right there.
Yeah. And then mold, same story. I won't go into all that, but had severely toxic mold related illness, didn't know what it was, finally found out it was mold. And as always, my life, my soul's journey now, I know this, is to experience things, to understand them at a deep, 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 deep level, and then to share that knowledge with the world. And so mold was the same thing. I was so sick from mold. And mold was far worse than cancer because there was not a phase. People didn't even know what it was. And they thought it was crazy that mold could cause illness. It's like, oh, my grandmother has mildew in the shower. How can that kill you? But the truth is, for those of us who are really sensitive, mold is actually maybe the worst kind of illness because it's somewhat invisible. It affects all systems. It affects your brain and emotions and relationships. And all that to say that once again, I had to figure that out. I had to trust my intuition deeply. And then I really, really found a path and a pattern that I could share with my patients, with clients, with followers on how to heal from mold, because sadly, it's becoming more and more prevalent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm curious about the timeline and how you keep hope in this. Like when you're trying to figure out mold, just from my interactions with Brooke and sitting in the doctor office with her and the way that they talk about it, it's like there's so many different things you can do and then implementing it. Like today, she was like, normally it's like 6 months for sure of doing this protocol, or like just this long drawn out experience of like staying hopeful and like trusting your intuition along that path, right? Because it is money, it is time, it is people telling you, you look fine. Like, right. What are you talking about? So how do you like sustain the hope in the midst of helping yourself, like cure this and take care of yourself?
Yes, this is such a great question because it really is the sustaining the long game, which I've been at for over 20 years. One thing I want to mention, and this was kind of to the point earlier about the fact that I still have days where I'm tired, and no one that you see out there is perfect, is really perfect. And I want to really be real because that gives hope to people who are suffering and think, oh, well, Dr. Jill has it all together. No, I don't. I learn every single day. And I always think the trajectory of healing is like this stair step with ups and downs. And when you're in a down, you feel like the down is going down, 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 down. It's not. It's temporary. I always say this too shall pass. For me, it started in breast cancer, 25. I'm just diagnosed, and I don't know if I have 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years. I don't know. I'm in the midst of a brand new, maybe fatal diagnosis. And I heard on the radio a minister who said, the sickness will not end in death, but it's for the glory of God. And whether you believe in God or not, that's up to you. But for me, I have a deep, deep belief in a faith in a higher power and a greater purpose. And that has sustained me through so many times, not only in illness, but when I climbed the Flatiron, the first time I ever got on a rock climb, thousands of feet up, and I'm terrified. The most terrifying situation I've ever been in is to be on this rock face with no experience, climbing thousands of feet above the houses. And even in that moment, I just had this faith, like, I can do this one step, one breath, one pill, one nap at a time. I can do this. And the things that kept me sustained were the same principles in illness and life. Is number one, be present. All you have is this rock right in front of you, and you have the next grab on your foothold. You have the next handhold, and that's all you have at this moment. If you look back thousands and thousands of feet below to the tiny houses and trees that look like minuscule, I would lose courage and I would maybe fall. And if I looked ahead at the thousands of feet up of rock I still had left to climb, I was like, I can't do this. This is too much. This is too much. And you can feel that with illness, right? Those days when you're sick and you're not feeling well, you're like, this is too much. But if you stay present, this next breath, and maybe you call in a friend, maybe you go out in nature, maybe you do something that you know that you need to do to just give yourself love and compassion, and then keep going. All you have to do is take that next breath. And all you have to do is take that next sip of water. And all you have to do is that next kindness to yourself. And bit by bit by bit, it's like climbing a rock. And I'm telling this because I went on that rock face with zero experience. My rock climbing partner, 40 years of rock climbing experience. After we were done, he said, Jill, I have never, ever in my life taken someone who's never had experience on this climb. He said, but somehow I knew you could do it. And when I got to that top, I was crying and laughing because I said, I did it. And it's no different from illness, because when you accomplish something, when you push through and you don't give up, it creates in you a sense of knowing that you have the ability to do what's next. And many, many times when it's pain, suffering, loss, illness, death of a friend, a family, it is that next breath, and that is all you have, but you can do that next breath, and then the next one, and then the next one. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon, you've climbed a mountain.
Oh, I'm so emotional. You're speaking to my soul. That is such good advice. And it's the power of being present and a meditation practice and focusing on the here and the now, because you look 5 steps ahead of, I think about anyone going through anything, whether it's motherhood or an illness. It's like, holy shit, that's a lot. Right. That's too much. That's too much. Like, of course your nervous system's going to freak out, and the body can't heal when it's in that state. And so that is such a good reminder for me and for anyone listening that all we have is now. And that goes back to the gratitude too.
And I just want to circle back, because this is how your book starts. It starts with a quote. I think it's Oprah Winfrey talking about the mountain. And it's so true. You can look at someone on Instagram or wherever you follow people and think, wow, they've climbed this mountain. They're on the top of it. But it's like, it's up and down and the ridges and the whatever. But I think that's also, it's such a beautiful book about the journey of this, and to have someone that has walked the walk, that has literally climbed the rocks and done these climbs. It's so beautiful. I'm so happy that you wrote this too. I think getting started, people want tips and ideas so they can even tap into their intuition to be like, what is speaking to me from what Dr. Jill is saying? Like, what is the tip that feels right for me to take the first step? Because I think sometimes people don't even know where to start.
Yeah, we can be paralyzed, right? And it's just that, like, I love that you said Brooke presence, because that's really what it is. And like, even here right now, we're virtual, but I feel your presence, I feel your energy, I feel your love, and I hope you feel mine as well, because it's like in community, that's where we really overcome challenges. And we all I need you, you need me, we all need one another. And so often when you're in that, you're paralyzed or you're stuck or you're like, what's the next step? You need someone to be a cheerleader. I talk in the movie, and we do another climb and actually film it. And part of the thing, and it was totally accidental. It was non-scripted. My climbing partner's down below saying, I said, Topher, this part right here looks really difficult. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm on the rock, right? He's like, Jill, just pretend like you're a little kid climbing on the jungle gym. And where's your next foothold? And I look, and you can hear me like timidly go, maybe here. And then I take a step. And then he continues to encourage me. And I get down, and we're sitting there talking when I'm done. And I said, you know what, Topher? A lot of times my patients ask me, am I going to make it? Am I going to be okay? And the truth is, I don't know. But the other truth is, I believe in them. And I say, you're going to be okay. I'm here with you. I will help you. I will encourage you. I believe there is a way out of this illness. And my belief in them, it's almost like they can borrow my belief. And I can be that cheerleader, just like my rock climbing buddy was for me. And we can do that for other people. We can be their faith. We can be that person who says, I believe in you. You can do this, and I am here for you no matter what. And that is such powerful medicine.
Yeah, like that's healing in itself. I think of all of the doctors, I saw over 50 doctors, and finally getting introduced to functional medicine, and just the doctor asking all about me and feeling that compassion. I'm like, you didn't even need to give me any tips, any advice, but just sitting with me and believing that I wasn't crazy, believing in what I had to say, and believing I was gonna be okay. Like that's something money can't buy. that is medicine to its core. And you feel that reading this book, like the belief of I'm going to be okay. Even if you're not dealing with chronic illness, the amount of value in this book, like we just barely scratched the surface in these past 50 minutes, but there's mold tips, cancer tips, book recommendations, relationships advice, self-love practices, non-toxic beauty products, detoxifying tips before you get pregnant, testing before the age of 30. Like I don't know how you packed this much in 220 some pages. So where can everyone find the book? Where can they find more of you so we can all keep learning from you?
Oh, thank you, Brooke. My website is jillcarnahan.com, and website, the blog, the book, the movie, the podcast can all be found from there. And Instagram is Dr. Jill Carnahan.
Wonderful. Such a great follow. So inspirational. And Dr. Jill, as you know, we always end our episode with 3 segments. One of them is your 3 gold stars. You have given a million gold stars already. But what would your top 3 tips be for our listeners?
Oh gosh, there's a million. Let's see. Sleep. Sleep is core. We talked about clean air, clean water, clean food, but sleep is my superpower. And if you're not sleeping, that is just such a core of health. And it's pretty simple to start working on sleep, or allowing yourself to sleep better. I want to say working on that actually reiterates the fact that we have to work harder, which I don't want to do. So find some ways to improve your sleep. Second, I am going to reiterate the clean air, clean water, clean food. You don't need a lot of expensive supplements, and you can start simply. So if all you do is buy a simple water filter for your fridge, you can start there, or a shower filter. And then that loving yourself, having self-compassion, checking in. What does she need from me today? Those are the 3 tips I would give.
Love it.
Love it. All right. Up next is Unleashing Ivy, rapid fire questions. My question is about the movie. I just want you to tell people about it because I think it's incredible.
Thank you. drpatientmovie.com. You can watch it, gift it, rent it, whatever you want. I hope it inspires. That is our only goal. We're never going to make back the investment we had in it. It's not about making money. It's literally about inspiring the world. And book and movie both. I put out a lot just because the thing I care about is inspiration. In that movie, you're going to see me like you've never seen before. You're going to see the ugly cry scenes, all these things that I was terrified to share. But I realized that that's our connective tissue with humanity. So I hope you'll get a chance to see it and be inspired. It also follows the journey of several of my patients who've overcome really difficult illnesses. And really the bigger picture is that love yourself. We actually use the acronym BLT in the movie: believe in yourself, love yourself, and trust your intuition.
Yeah. And I saw a clip of how a partner, like someone that went to the movie with their spouse that was chronically ill, talking through, like, really feeling like they understood their partner better, and the compassion that they didn't have before that movie, because it is a lot of times it is this mystery illness, or you can't see, Brooke looks lively and beautiful and she is so fun and energetic. And so a lot of times she's not asked about how she's doing, or people are like, she's better, huh? And it's like, yes. I think having something for people to feel more seen and understood is so beautiful. I'm so happy you created that. I want to talk more about, I'm really into like consciousness, a flow state, like thinking about you and like your creative, deep mind. And I'm just wondering like how you get yourself into the flow state and why that's so important for you to make sure that you create space to get yourself there.
Oh, good question.
Such a good question, because if you jam pack your schedule like I am prone to do, you don't have the creative space and it's stressful and you will not get into flow. What happens with flow is there's several stages, and one of the stages is struggle. You literally have to push through the struggle to get to the flow. And if you know that, say you sit down to write or you sit down to do something, you're like, oh, this is so frustrating, it's not coming to me, and you think you're the only one. That's actually part of the flow state. So you get over that, you get into flow, and then after flow is recovery, which means sleeping or eating right or taking a break, and that's why actually block systems of working work much better than working an 8-hour day. We were never really meant to go nonstop 8 hours. So you're much better off doing like a 90-minute productive session than going out for a walk for 30 minutes and coming back than you are just to sit at your desk and push yourself for 8 hours. Flow is timelessness, effortlessness. If you've ever been watching jazz musicians perform, if you've ever seen a surfer do a 50-foot wave, if you've ever yourself, like when I was climbing the rock, you're like, you have to be present. You have to be completely present. You lose track of time and space. And you get into this place where you're incredibly creative, whether it's music, whether it's art, or whether it's a sport or physicality. You become, you do stuff that you never thought you could do. And I just really, really love harnessing this, because I think it's actually through flow and practicing flow that we can heal our bodies, because it's the optimal place of endorphins, norepinephrine, dopamine, all of the things that make us feel good. So in a way, it's like a way to get a natural high without drugs.
Oh, I love it because I get this running, and I know that that's not for everybody, but a lot of our listeners, I know that a lot of them don't know what would give them that feeling, and it's so powerful, and it feels so good to get these creative ideas that you don't know where they're coming from, and you were like, whoa, you're hit by them. And so I just want to encourage anybody that's listening that's like, I have never lost track of time and whatever. You just start to explore that. Like, what tickles your fancy? What gets you excited to think about doing? What could you carve out some time for? Because that just got me so excited to like go for a long run right now. But that's because I know what it is for me. And I want that for our listeners too.
How did you find that, what that was for you? Like, what advice would you give to people who are like, I don't know?
Good question. Well, one thing I think is important is a lot of the books, Stephen Kotler and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which I finally learned how to pronounce, often talk about flow states with sports, but you don't have to be athletic. You can do it with music, with art, with writing, with creativity. You can even do it with a deep conversation with a friend. I find when I look back, when I'm with a patient in the office and I'm sitting there listening and asking questions and I lose track of time, it's a flow state. It's kind of a community social flow state. So you could do this with coffee with a friend when you just get really, really present. So you have to be present. You have to get past the struggle, and then usually it'll come. So as far as how to find what you think about, back to your 5-year-old self, what did you like to do? Did you ride your bike? Did you color? You might find a little hidden thing. I love to read, and I can still get into flow states when I'm reading or writing. So think about your younger self. What did you love to do that you no longer do? That might be a good place to start.
Oh, yes. I like the idea too of it can be multiple different things. You don't have to be doing one thing.
Yes.
So cool. Okay, my question is, what is one health product and one health practice you can't live without?
Ooh, so I could say like magnesium and D, but they're so basic. Everybody has heard about them. My newest one that I feel like is so powerful is something called PRMs, pro-resolving mediators. They're down the road from EPA DHA fish oil, so they're made from that product. And you can get them in all kinds of different brands, pro-resolving mediators. They are like thousands of times more powerful than just plain old fish oil for pain, for inflammation. They're anti-prostaglandin, they're anti-mast cell. I can't live without them. And especially with long COVID and mast cell activation, I use them all the time in patients. So I would say the pro-resolving mediators are the hot new item.
Okay.
And what was the second part of the question?
A health practice you swear by.
I'm going to go back to sleep, but I'm going to say with that, the PEMF mat, which is right beside me here, my absolute favorite go-to if I can't sleep or I wake up during the night, or even if I just want to relax, that PEMF mat is so powerful for sleep and for healing.
Oh my gosh. I think we threw in a bonus question, but we always ask everyone.
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. No, it's good. I could talk to you for 17 hours, but we always ask everyone, if you could go back to your younger self, what would you tell her? What age would she be? What do you imagine? And what would you say to her?
So I would probably be 7 or 8 year old. And I remember like, I was like full of love and life and energy and curiosity. But somehow in my culture, I felt like I had to, if I was a dial on the radio, I had to turn it down to about a 6 instead of a 10 out of 10, because in that culture, you know, you didn't want to be too loud or too obnoxious or too many questions or whatever, too much of anything. And somehow I sensed at a very young age, I was too much. So I turned down the volume, and I lived that way for years and years and decades. And then all of a sudden I started living my 10 out of 10 self. And I would love to go back to the 8-year-old and say, dance, wear hot pink, put colors in your hair, whatever kind of crazy ideas that you have, live that fully and don't tone it down for anyone.
Oh, that's such great advice.
I love it so
and
much.
now that I'm 40 something, I always have purple or pink hair.
Yes.
That's part of my little 8-year-old's like, I always wanted purple hair and now I get to have it.
It's never too late.
You are just a unicorn. I mean, to be a physician, to go through all the things you've gone through, to be this beautiful and warm, and like your patients are so lucky to get to land in your office. Man, I wish I lived where you live. I would pay big bucks to sit in your office. And I'm so happy you sat with us, because this has been such a gift. And I know this book is going to just be, and the film and your podcast is just going to keep lighting this world up. So I'm so happy that you're 10 out of 10 now. And so grateful for your time.
Thank you. You too. It has been an absolute joy and a pleasure to be with both of you. And you can tell that you guys are walking the walk and practicing the practice. And thank you for bringing light to stories in your podcast because the world needs to hear that.
Yes, and the world needs to hear yours. So thank you again. Dr. Joe, we leave our listeners with a piece of gold, a quote. Would you please share yours?
Sure. Since you gave me the heads up, I'm going to use one from the book.
Yes.
It's about faith because whatever you believe, I believe that faith is simply a peaceful relationship with the inevitable uncertainty that arises when we don't have all the answers. And when we can kind of be in that place of uncertainty, that's really all faith is.
This is Gold Ivy signing off.
Listen to your truth and go chase your gold.
Wow, Dr. Jill. Wow.
My heart is exploding. This is such a gift.